when I first posted a picture or a video about this thing, I was genuinely surprised at the response I got from people. I don't really know why people were so interested in it and so excited by it, because it's not very original. I'm pretty sure Ockbots did this like a year ago and started following some planes and things around. And does anybody remember the Discovery, the the TPS Discovery, which was kind of the original FPV quad, and it pretty much required a gimbal because flight firmware was so bad back then. You really needed a gimbal for it to give you any kind of smooth video whatsoever. And so I'm just kind of confused at why people are so excited about putting a gimbal on an FPV quad. Maybe it's because the gimbal costs money and it's fragile. If you crash, you're pretty much going to destroy the gimbal. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe it's the fear factor, the danger factor. Anyways, okay, let's discuss my experience with this gimbal. So first and foremost, this gimbal is a complete piece of junk. I've had it for well over a year now. I just haven't used it, and this is the first time I've used it for anything. I even tried to sell it for like $70 and nobody wanted the gimbal. So that's why I'm like, okay, screw it. Let's just put it on a quad and see what it can do, which was a bad decision. So the gimbal seems great, and here, oh shoot, hold on, and here, so people really want to know what happens when you flip upside down, and I'll show you what happens when you flip upside down. I didn't actually do it in flight, but here, check this out. So I'll flip it upside down, nothing happens. The gimbal just looks back on itself because it's confused. It doesn't know what to do, and let's flip back over, and then it's going to turn back around. So nothing happens, but here's the main issue with this gimbal. It actually does not have as much, camera up a little bit, enough freedom of movement. So while it seems like I can really move around and the gimbal will take care of a lot of stuff, when you're going fast, I mean, we turn a lot harder than we think, and the gimbal just kind of runs into itself. It doesn't actually work, and sometimes it gets confused and it just looks in a weird direction when you're flying around. So this is really just an awful gimbal. If I was to put a gimbal on an FPV quad, I would definitely go with a 2-axis gimbal, not a 3-axis gimbal. But then again, I would argue, what's really the use of a gimbal on an FPV quad? Yeah, and you should also consider a Phantom for a gimbal work, which I'll discuss in a minute. So let's talk about that. Gimbals on FPV quads. So I after going through this experience and really learning how to use this gimbal, which you really can't use it on an FPV quad, I realized that you can actually do some amazing things with a gimbal if you had the right firmware, if it was set up for FPV. So when we're flying FPV, we're doing dives and flips and rolls and whatnot, and we don't really need a gimbal to kind of stabilize everything. We just need a gimbal to kind of buffer our movements. So just kind of delay things and blend things together, even further than Butterflight or any firmware might be able to do. So what I would envision gimbal software for FPV to be is, first of all, we'd use a camera gimbal system like the Mavic, which is a tiny little camera and gimbal, which it's really sad that no company in the world makes a system like that you can buy off the shelf. I really wish DJI would make something like that. And I talked to Butterfly guys about actually building it into the flight controller and actually making it like a tab in the flight control firmware setting system. But then when you think about it, to run a gimbal, you actually need to have two more motor outs. You need to have a UART for the IMU for the camera, and then you also need to have 2 more motors and then 2 more ESCs. So it's kind of a cumbersome thing to put on a quad and kind of wire up. Already we have so many wires going everywhere. It's probably better to just have a standalone setup and leave it at that, and preferably something like the Mavic. So let's discuss what gimbal software might look like. So the gimbal, like I said, would just kind of smooth stuff, and I'm just dreaming, and I've just been thinking about this ever since I started playing with this dumb gimbal. So it would just kind of smooth your movements, and it would follow your pitch, roll, and yaw, like exactly. It would only be 2-axis. You don't need it on the yaw. It would be pitch and roll, and so you could actually do dives and flips and rolls and whatnot, and the gimbal would follow you, and the PIDs of the gimbal would, compensate for a whole bunch of stuff. So that's that. The quad was a piece of junk with this gimbal on. So the weight of the gimbal and all up weight with a 1500 5S pack was just over 700 grams, which is actually not like a ton of weight. This is a 6-inch quad, and it's running 2507 motors with 2500 kV, so it has a lot of power. but it still just doesn't go. It doesn't have the speed. So I was hoping it had a lot more speed. At least I could go straight. And essentially this is only good for going in a straight line. So yeah, that's it. High weight, high drag, not good, not recommended. Don't bother. You know, forget the idea of buying a gimbal and putting it on a mini quad. It's no good. And really, actually, the most beneficial thing that came out of this is that these little rubber bobbins, they actually make the video super duper smooth with no jello or anything whatsoever. I do not have any ND filters, as you can see. I don't know why I don't have any ND filters yet, but I need to get some. And maybe it's worth considering adding bobbins again to GoPro mounts to see if we can get rid of the jello. Yeah, that's that. That's that for that gimbal. Oh yeah, so I was flying around in the desert, and sand is horrible for quads. I have always hated sand more than fresh water. I would rather dunk my quad in fresh water than have it land in sand. And this is why. Can you even hear that? Sand is stuck in my motors. Listen to that. That's just awful. It just sounds terrible. And there's just about no way to get that out. I have to take apart the motor and like wash out the magnets and wash out the bell, and you can't get it off because the magnets are so strong now, and all the sand has a bunch of like magnetic components to it, so you can't get it out of the motor. Like, I don't know if you can see this. Let me try to focus on it. Look at these. I just got magnetic shards just sticking to all the magnets and everything. So yeah, stay away from sand. All my quads are now full of sand, and I don't really care. I just flew them anyways, and you know, hope that the sand would wash out. And yeah, that's just how it's gonna be because I'm way too lazy to rebuild all my motors. So now let's discuss what is real, what I really used to make that video with the Jeeps, which is this guy. So I originally built the gimbal quad for use on this trip because a friend called me up and said, hey, we're going to go on like a Jeep adventure with some Jeep guys. They want to have some footage for God knows what, for advertising, marketing, and whatever. And so I built the gimbal quad and I tested it, and it was just terrible. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be just bad. I also didn't know where we were going. They didn't tell me we were going to the desert until the very last minute, or else I would have figured out a way to get some ND filters so I wouldn't get some jello on the mini quad, and you know, I could actually use that footage. But here's what I did. I wanted to use FPV because like I've been flying FPV for so long now, I know that I can fly FPV really well and get really good video. So that's why I wanted to add the gimbal to the mini quad. So I just added FPV to the Phantom, and I've done this before with some other people with an Inspire. They kind of, the pilot flies at FPV, and then the second man mans the camera, so that way you can actually fly through trees and close objects because you don't have the latency of the HD feed from the Phantom. And a couple people commented on my video, like, why can't you just do this with the feed from the Phantom? I would love to see somebody try and get that kind of smooth footage close to moving objects and people with that kind of smoothness. It's literally impossible, and I've tried to do it a lot. And I've talked to professional videographers that use like Phantoms and Inspires and the bigger stuff for production videos and movies. I watch them fly, and they have this technique where they just set the sticks and hold them. And they just hold them and hold the shot and just hope it comes out. Or people that are using the Inspire will actually just set it on the orbit feature, or they have like an app or something to get it orbit. Anyways, flying a Phantom in FPV is just so easy, it's ridiculous. I have not flown the Phantom in over a year, and when I added FPV to it, I thought it might be a little bit weird because I haven't flown an auto level for so long, and I don't fly with, you know, altitude hold. But surprisingly, it was really, really easy, and I could get really close to stuff. But a note about getting close to stuff: the FPV cameras actually see things much closer than they appear. So I was getting way closer to the cars and people than I wanted to, and nobody flinched or said anything, even though I told everybody, big disclaimer, that, you know, I am piloting this thing for FPV. I cannot see exactly where my camera's tilted too, I just realized that. I cannot see exactly where I'm going, and I did actually run into a rock once and the thing flipped over, but whatever, it's a Phantom. As you can see, my Phantom has a broken leg, and if you saw the props, they look like they'd like hacked through trees, because I essentially just use this Phantom to cut my mini quads out of trees because I have no use for a Phantom. I don't really use it for anything, although The gimbal is freaking awesome, and the video that comes out of this thing is just incredible. So now that I've stuck FPV on this, which I literally just stuck it on this thing in the field, I am probably going to try to use it more because it's freaking awesome. And I would recommend people add FPV to a Phantom or something else. Note that this is like a Phantom 3, so I don't even have the yaw access. Oh, I do have yaw access. Oh, wait, so then I have to set my yaw settings in the app. Jeez, that's how much I know how to use a Phantom. I used to know how to use a Phantom really well, but not really that much anymore. Oh, yes, another note. Maybe this is a fantastic long-range platform because it has return to home and it's so easy to pilot. Like, I could fly along ridges without worry. And also keep in mind that, like, I was in the desert and I did this like on a whim, and this is like the first time I've flown a Phantom in a long time. Not like it's difficult or anything, but like it was not optimal conditions, and I was still able to get some pretty nice smooth video. So just that's all I wanted to say. Okay, next is this thing. So the company Jumper was making this controller, and they actually talked to me about it before it was in production, and I don't have the battery in. And I was kind of interested in it because it was so small, and it actually comes in a really small little case package thing, which is, it's really nice that it comes in such a tiny case. And the controller is really, really, really small, and it has all the power of a bigger controller. And it also has a JR port, which does not accept Crossfire. It does accept Crossfire if you want to run PPM, but who wants to run PPM? So yeah, forget about that. When I took the controller out of the box, I haven't even used it to fly anything yet, although it does have multi-protocol, as it says here, and it does connect to like all the little toys and stuff. The controller is so darn tiny that like it doesn't fit in your hands properly, and the gimbals have the least throw of any gimbal that I've ever used. Like the travel on the sticks are very, very small, and I don't like that. I prefer my Tyrannus with a very long travel on the sticks, so I have, you know, seemingly more resolution. So if you have little 10-year-old hands, maybe this is the right thing for you because it does connect to, or at least it says it connects to FreeSky and whatnot, but otherwise I wouldn't really recommend it. Yeah, it's a funny little thing, although it does feel pretty good quality. I'm not a fan of the yellow color, but it does feel pretty good quality. It's really just the size and the gimbals that they chose to use that I'm not a fan of, even though they're Hall sensor gimbals and whatnot, whatever. So another thing I wanted to share is, okay, so this guy Ryan, I've been talking to this guy Ryan for a while now, I think almost a year, and he does like speed quads, and they are insane speed quads. At the time when DRL was doing their speed run and they hit like the 180 miles per hour, or was it 100? I don't even know if it was 180, but like the average was like 171 miles per hour, and that's what they got the Guinness record for, is like 170 miles per hour speed record. This guy was, you know, making his super speed rigs, and they essentially look like bullets that fly through the sky, like straight, not like at an angle like a mini quad does traditionally. And he was running 4S and 5S, and he was getting 160 to 170 miles per hour on 4S and 5S. And note that the DRL guys needed 8S and 10S to get up to 170 miles per hour or 180 miles per hour. So he recently put 6S on his new quad just on a whim, to, you know, before he goes on a trip, and he hit 200 miles per hour, which is pretty shocking because he only added 4 extra volts. So this really lends a lot of support to the idea that aerodynamics really do matter a whole lot. And so, like I said, I've been talking to Ryan, the guy that builds all this stuff, for a while now, and he has been telling me that he has designs for frames that are, you know, between 10 and 15 grams for a 5-inch frame. And I'm like, what are you smoking? What futuristic material are you using that is 15 grams for a 5-inch frame? And then he tells me, oh, at 30 grams, it's an unbreakable tank. Okay, man, what are you on? Like, literally, what frame is a tank at 30 grams for a 5-inch frame? That's just bonkers. So I told him, you know, I would love to help him bring his idea to market, and he actually did get like a provisional patent on his design, and he is going through real channels to bring this design to market. And we're not planning on selling it for like hundreds of dollars. It is, I've now seen it after signing a couple of NDAs and various things. It is a bonkers design that is the most original thing that I've seen in the space yet. I think maybe somebody has seen something similar to it here and there, but the geometry of it and the way it actually functions structurally is not like anything I've seen. So that's gonna come in the future. I'm really, really excited to fly that thing. In fact, the production version that he's designed so far is 26 grams, and it seems like it will be very durable. I haven't actually held one or flown it yet, but just judging by the materials and how they work and what I know of carbon fiber, it is carbon fiber. I think it's actually going to hold up really well, and I think I'm going to get some 2204 6S kV motors, like 1800 kV motors, to put on that thing, and maybe on an 800 milliamp 6S, it might be freaking awesome. Okay, so enough about that. And then the last thing I wanted to go over is, once again, this quad. So I was at the race, the Pureflip race at Open Grove Raceway this weekend, which is they did such a phenomenal job putting together this race. They really, really did. All the top pilots from across the country really were at that race, and Jordan was there too with Zach, and they brought all their quads that they normally fly on a regular basis. So Jordan lives in Colorado. I think he still lives. I think he might have moved, but he lived in Colorado, which has very open ranges, and it has very big mountains. So the quads that he needs to fly need to be able to cover a lot of ground, and that's probably why Zach and Jordan prefer 6-inch, because it can cover a lot more ground much easier, much more efficiently than 5-inch can. And so, you get back into the notion where you really become a product of your surroundings. Matty Stunts does all of his weird, upside-down, crazy, backwards things because he's flying around trees that are 400 feet tall, and so he needs the 6S to be able to scale these trees like mad, and he's got all this monstrous power, so he can start doing these ridiculous moves with them. So that's a lot of fun. Anyways, he was telling me about his mountain cruiser quad, which he flies every day, and it's his preferred quad to any other quad that he's ever built. So this mountain cruiser runs F80 motors. That's a 2408 motor. He runs it on a 5S 2200 milliamp pack, and he runs the gate breaker prop, the 6-inch gate breaker prop, which I personally did not like at all. I thought it was extremely inefficient. It was sluggish because I didn't have a motor big enough that could actually spin the prop properly. But once you put it on his quad, which has an all-up weight of about 900 grams, by the way, yeah, it's a very heavy quad with a 5S 2200 milliamp pack, it's a totally different story. And so what I realized was, he was telling me all about his quad, and I'm like, interesting, I actually wanted to fly it and try it, and he was going to let me fly it, but then I realized, oh wait, I have a quad that's exactly this, essentially the same. I have a quad that has, he had 2200 kV motors, but I had a quad with the FPV-AF 2507 2500 kV motors, and it is built on a 6S stack, the HGLRC, Dino Shot Dinosaur 6S pack, 6S stack, which I hadn't tested on 6S yet, but I figured, what a great time to give it a shot and blow up my quad, because it's not going to be useful on the Jeep trip tomorrow. So I switched the props. I borrowed some gate breakers from him, put some gate breakers on, switched it out, and I used the same 2200 milliamp Pyro 5S pack. And I put the Groper on, and my quad felt like it was about 150 to 200 grams lighter than his quad, because my frame is smaller. He's using a frame that has similar 5mm arms, but they're much chunkier, much bigger. The thing is just a monster. The frame is a 7-inch frame. And so when I flew it, I was really taken back, because while the props are just grossly inefficient, when you cruise, it's not actually sipping too much current. It's actually just sipping current just enough, but when you punch it, you get this wave of speed that I had never felt on any other quad before. Like he said, the quad had kind of an envelope of flight. These are his words exactly. It has an envelope of flight that no other quad he's flown has, and he meant that it can do long range, and it gives you all the speed and agility because it's got monstrous motors and monstrous power. And the 900 gram weight really doesn't matter all that much when you have that much power. And the battery is so large that you can't really sag the battery out. So it was a very interesting experience to fly that quad. And what ended up happening was I actually lost a screw of the bell. Like I lost the bell screw. It just flew off the motor, and so then the quad fell out of the sky. I thought I had burnt my ESC or something, but no. And then I flew it around one more time, and it was interesting. It was very interesting. It was just very interesting. I'm still not a fan of the gate breaker, but there's something to be said about that kind of a class of quad that he built. and it's just interesting. I'll have more to say about that later. Okay, well, that's it for this time. I have a lot more to say. I actually did get a bunch of new stuff in the mail recently that I can't even show yet, but I'm going to be testing it very soon, and I hope that I can show it very soon. Yeah, it's very cool. I think I've opened the project for my controller once again. I think I'm actually going to develop a controller. I hope. And yes, I'm going to stop on that right now. Don't forget to floss. Please floss. Take care. And yes, bye.